everyone, I'm Juliana Keeping. I'm a reporter for the Oklahoman and newsok.com. This is my colleague Zeke Campfield, and welcome to our Google Hangout on suicide prevention, teen suicide prevention specifically, and bullying in schools. What's prompting our discussion was a tragic event in Stillwater on September 26th. A 13-year-old 8th grade student, Cade Poulos, took his own life at school. He shot himself in the head in the hallway in front of other teachers and students. The tragedy drew national and even international attention, but it's also raised a lot of questions and prompted a lot of discussion about teen suicide and to some extent even bullying, even though in this case, his family has said bullying was not a factor at all. But still, we thought we would bring in some state experts and to just kind of walk us through what we need to know about teen suicide, about suicide in Oklahoma, and about bullying, and where it makes sense when those two things interact. So we brought some experts in, and I want to introduce them to you. We have Ken Elliott. Welcome, Ken.
Hi.
Hi. He is the coordinator of testing services, director of the Violence Prevention Project at the University of Central Oklahoma, as well as, I believe, a longtime counselor. Is that right, Ken? Family counselor.
Yes.
and that sort of
Yes.
thing?
Yes,
Welcome.
and domestic violence too. Thank you.
And domestic violence counselor. Okay. We're so glad to have you here. We have UCO student Javon Hughes.
Javon.
Hi, Javon. How are you?
I'm fine.
And Javon will tell you more about what he does in a bit. We have David Harris. Where are you, David? Hi. David Harris is the project director for the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. Glad to have you here. And we have Lisa Harper. Lisa's the Hi, Lisa. Lisa's the director of development for Hartline, which runs the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
For Oklahoma, as well as providing referral services, crisis services, and things of that nature. So we'll start it off, I guess, with a couple facts, Zeke, about suicide in Oklahoma, and we'll just throw some questions out to you guys.
Actually, my first question is going to be for Lisa. Lisa, when we were investigating this story and doing some research, I learned from you that suicide is actually the second leading cause of death for youth in Oklahoma, ages 10 to 24, which is 31% higher than the national average. And so we just wanted to start there. If you could explain maybe why the Oklahoma suicide rate is so much higher than the rest of the country.
Well, it's hard to say why our area is worse than others, but we can say that here it's often a really taboo subject. We don't like to talk about suicide. We don't like to talk about mental illness. And I think everybody that's here today, our hope is that we can make it something that people are willing to talk about and make it more accessible. And also, I know in rural areas, if you look at the rates, tend to have higher rates than some of our metropolitan areas. And I don't know if that plays into why people, don't talk about it, but that is an aspect of it, is just that closed door aspect where we're trying to get people to talk about it more.
I think that you had listed to me maybe some reasons that young people might choose to attempt or commit suicide. We talked about bullying earlier. We talked about depression. Could you maybe break down some of those facts and talk a little bit about what may be the driving force behind this high rate of youth suicide in Oklahoma?
Well, suicide is about ending pain, and that pain often comes from stresses and losses in life. And so for teens, they're often really focused on their current circumstances. So what we see from some reports is that some of the top reasons are a crisis in the past 2 weeks, intimate partner problems, which doesn't have to be a romantic relationship, but just an intimate relationship, as well as dealing with depression are kind of in some of those top reasons that we see with teens. But it could be stresses and losses from all different things that happen in life, from school, from family, from personal insecurities, from just a variety of things. And loss doesn't have to be death. It can be losing, moving away from your friends. It could be your parents getting divorced. It can really be a variety, but it's about having that pain that they feel like will never end, and the only way they can think to stop it is to end their life.
And bullying is one of those things. I know that they talk a lot about online bullying these days and the different access that it can be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in some cases. Have you seen then that is the case, that sometimes social situations and being taunted by peers and things of that nature may be leading to these kinds of acts of desperation?
Well, bullying could definitely be one of those stressors that we talked about, one of those things that's adding a lot of stress or making them feel down or depressed. But a lot of times when we see suicide, it's often a combination of reasons. So we can't look at just at bullying as the causation, because it can come from a variety of things. But it could definitely add to somebody's stress or make them feel depressed or down.
We wanted to talk too about a story out of Edmond that this year, early in the year, they had a rash of 3 student suicides. These didn't occur at a school. They occurred actually among students at different schools, I think in private. But Ken was involved in the response, Edmond's response to these young people taking their lives. And I wondered if Ken could tell us something about what the school's response was to the suicides. Just enlighten us, I guess.
Well, as you said, those 3 young people came from 3 different school sites, and so what happened was the whole community of Edmond was reeling in the aftermath of these losses. Each school came up with a plan to provide what we call postvention services, and that includes having space and time and counselors available to speak with students and faculty and staff, and to provide a place for students who may also be at risk to also be able to talk about their feelings, because what we found is
oh, I think we got cut off.
We'll go back to Ken here in a second.
Sorry, Ken, we're going to go back to you. We can't hear you right now.
David, I've got some questions for you, actually. We were talking earlier about, in this story, you weren't involved previously, but there's some different classifications of people that are more prone to attempting or following up with suicide than others. I know I read that boys are more likely than girls to commit, and girls are more likely than boys actually to attempt. And then there's some racial differences too, and these were numbers from the state. And I'm curious, in your work with the department, have you found any groups that are at higher risk than others, and some ways that maybe we can use that information to work to prevent these types of things from happening?
Well, yes. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you.
We've found that there are different ethnicity groups that have higher rates of attempting and completing, and as you said, females attempt about 4 times as often, but males complete at a higher percentage because they use a more lethal means, and so because the means that they use is more lethal, therefore they die at a higher rate when they do attempt. And Native American youth are among the highest, as are Caucasian youth, and then the other ethnic minorities such as Latino, African American, Asian, they're considerably lower than the Caucasian and American Indian youth.
How can the department use some of those details and some of that research to actually come up with some effective ways to maybe reduce that teen suicide rate?
Well, one of the things that we're doing is we have federal funding to prevent youth suicide, and we focus on ages 10 to 24 is what our project focuses on. And our priority populations are American Indian youth, and also youth that are involved in the military, 18 to 24-year-old youth that are either active duty, reserved, or already retired or veterans. They also have a high percentage of suicide attempts and completions. So we focus on those populations, as well as youth at risk who may have mental health or substance abuse issues and or emotional disorders. They also tend to be in the higher risk category. So those are our 3 primary focus areas. And so we use funding to target solutions in those communities that may have a high proportion of either American Indian youth or veterans. For example, this weekend we met with all the state leadership from the National Guard across Oklahoma, the generals and the colonels and majors, and we had an open discussion for several hours about what they can be doing from a not only an intervention approach, but further upstream, meaning prior to people becoming suicidal, what can they be doing as protective factors? So what we're focusing on is intervention as well as protective factors. So we intervene and identify a youth and provide and refer to mental health services, but we also are looking at what, from a public health standpoint, what can we be doing to help prevent this from a bigger picture, meaning what can be done earlier in the youth's life to maybe prevent them from getting to a point of desperation.
Thank you, David. We're going to get to some comments from readers who are writing in. Looks like some of their questions, actually most of their questions involve bullying, which I know it's a huge topic right now. So let's see, Janet has asked, how do you get the schools to understand they do have a problem? My son was bullied, and all the superintendent said was we do not have a bullying problem at our school. She doesn't know if they do not understand or do they not want to face the problem. She writes, you know when you change schools and your son tells you the first day of school it was the best day of his life. He was 10 when this happened. Sorry, that's a little confusing, but maybe Ken, you could address, since you've worked with the school district, how do you get a school to really address bullying? It looks like from Janet's experience, the school's in a bit of denial about the fact that bullying is taking place at the school.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Sorry for the bad connection. We use a different system here at UCO.
Oh, that's okay.
Well, one thing is when a school district says that they have a no bullying, no tolerance policy, and they say because we have our no tolerance policy, we don't have bullying in our schools, that's inaccurate. There is bullying. There's bullying in every private school and public school. And the problem is, if you are addressing the issue with a person and they appear to talk down to you as a parent, or if they appear to minimize, or they accuse you of exaggerating the bullying incidents, or if they do something which is a taboo, that they pull the victim and the bully together and say together in a meeting, oh, we seem to have some misunderstandings here and we have some difficulties, let's work this out. That's inappropriate. You don't walk, you run to the next nearest person that will hear your concerns. As a parent, you need to be your child's best advocate. And if you get a response like that from someone in the school district, you will find 10 others who will listen to you and care. So I suggest that you go and you don't listen to just one response if it appears to minimize your needs or your child's needs. That you go and you keep talking until you get somebody who will hear you. And trust me, most people in schools do the right thing, and most staff in schools are the finest quality people you'll have, compassionate and caring. But if you get somebody who's insensitive, you need to move on. You need to find somebody in that school or that district that will hear you and hear your concerns.
Now, Ken, we lost you earlier, but you were, I believe, at Edmond schools as a counselor when they had their incidences back in January. I'm not sure if any of those were bullying related, but if you could just kind of continue and tell me, how the school and how the rest of the community responded to that, and what types of things that you learned from that task force that you were involved with.
Okay. Well, even prior to those 3 losses this past spring, a group of people came together. It's called the Edmond Suicide Prevention Task Force. And so on a community level, you've got members of the police department, you've got members of the school district, you've got counselors from the school district, you've got counselors from the community settings, you've got counseling agencies, private sector people pulling together to try to make a difference. What happened recently in Edmond with the 3 losses were so tragic, but this has been a growing problem in Edmond, as I suspect in other parts of the state, as was mentioned earlier. We're in a place where this is a single loss is way too much, but we're at a point where we've lost way too many people here in Edmond. It's needing not just a school response, it's needing a community-wide response. And so that's what we're trying to do. And as a member of the Edmond Suicide Prevention Task Force, that's why I'm here speaking today as someone saying it takes more than just schools. Schools take on so much nowadays. They're responsible for so many things. They can't do it alone.
What other sorts of community organizations or community people need to be involved with something like this? What have you guys been doing in Edmond?
Well, here in Edmond, we've got one of the largest nonprofit counseling agencies in town. Edmond Family Counseling is a real leader in the community in reaching out to families at risk and youth at risk. We've got, of course, the Edmond Police Department. We've got business leaders in the community. My co-chair is in the business sector on the task force. We've got skilled counselors and therapists. We've got clergy. Oh my gosh, we've got some of the best clergy around, and we've also addressed church as general as a place to go to help rally support, to really help deter and help suicide stop here in Edmond. Our goal as a group is to not only decrease the amounts of suicide, but to stop suicide.
Okay, Juliana?
Oh, Javon Hughes. If we could hear from Javon, we haven't gotten the chance to speak to him yet. Can you hear me, Ken?
He can't, but I can.
Oh, okay. Well, Javon, you now tell me more about what is your organization, and how do you guys work towards suicide prevention, and is it more college-based? Obviously, you're a college student, so I'd think so, but tell me what you do.
Well, my organization is To Write Love on Her Arms, or TWLOHA for short. And what we do is to help with suicide prevention, and we also help with substance abuse, self-injury, and mental health awareness. So we're covering all the aspects of it, not just the one.
What are you seeing? Actually, you're there and you're meeting with these people, and these are your fellow students. What kinds of things are people struggling with, and what seems to be the best way to help people overcome?
It's stress. Like, we as college students take on so much with debts, with midterms, with finals, with relationships, like you said. And sometimes it feels like you don't have someone to go to. You don't have an out. So it kind of gets overwhelming. But what we as an organization want to do is at least get our name out there and let them know, while we're not counselors, we can help you find a counselor.
Okay, so lining people up with resources, that sort of thing is what you're focused on.
Pretty much, like metaphorically writing love on their arms so suicide isn't their only option.
I want to go back to Lisa, if we can, for a second. Lisa, an important part of this story, like Javon said, is these resources, and I know that you guys provide one. Could you tell us a little bit about Hartline, and then some other options that people have if they're worried about their own mental health, or a loved one, or somebody that they work or go to school with?
Sure. Hartline has several different resources that people can use. One that you mentioned earlier is we answer the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline for every county in Oklahoma except for Tulsa County. It is answered there as well, just by a different center. And that number is 1-800-273-TALK. And all of our lines, they're 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's always somebody there to listen. And, part of that line, it doesn't mean that you have to be suicidal at the moment you're calling. Maybe you're considering suicide, or you're just a little bit depressed, and you just need to talk to somebody about that, and you want to get connected to somewhere like the counseling service he mentioned in Edmond, or maybe you're in a different community and you want to find counseling services or substance abuse services. We've got a database with thousands of different programs, and we can connect those people to resources to deal with whatever it is that's causing that stress, or to deal with that depression they're having. So that's a valuable number, even if someone is not right then suicidal, but maybe just dealing with some depression or mental illness of some kind. We also have a prevention program where we reach out to the youth in the Metro Oklahoma area, and it's called HELP, or the Healthy Education for Life program. And we go into a variety of different groups, and we talk to them about that taboo that we talked about, that stigma. And then we address, what can you do if you think you have a friend who's suicidal, and what are the warning signs? And so then we also give them that lifeline number we talked about. And another resource that anyone has if they're concerned about a friend is they can always call 911 and ask for something called a wellness check. And that's anonymous, and they will send out a crisis team to talk to that person.
Thanks, Lisa. If you're just joining us, I'm Juliana Keeping, and this is Zeke Campfield. We are reporters for the Oklahoman. We covered the tragic Cade Poulos case out of Stillwater. Cade unfortunately took his life at school on September 26th, and that's prompted a discussion with experts, which we are in the thick of now. And we're going to take another question from a reader. And if you'd like to write in, you just go to newsok.com/live, or you can go to our homepage, NewsOK, and it'll take you there. And there's a comment box to the side of the screen. You can put your questions in there. We'll try to get them answered. Let's see here. We have a question. Okay, so this person, it's a comment and a question combo. Schools have to be responsible for the safety of students, but isn't bullying But isn't bullying a part of social conditioning and preparation for the outside world? Isn't that a part of the school's responsibility, how to deal with peers? It's a little confusing, but another question this person asked is how much school involvement is too much? So I guess he's saying, shouldn't we accept some bullying in schools as kind of a natural progression of things, and where should a school draw the line as far as getting involved? I guess I'll ask Ken that question, since you've dealt with Edmond schools.
Ken might not have heard the question.
Oh.
He didn't hear the question. You might have to repeat it. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay, Ken.
It was a question that shouldn't we accept some bullying in schools? Is that what you're saying?
Well, he said this person was asking how much school involvement in too much is too much, and then he did say, isn't some bullying just kind of part of the natural order of things when you're a student growing up? What do you think about that?
Well, there's always going to be some difficulties in negotiating friendships growing up, and that's part of the growing up process. But the term bullying, let's get real. Bullying is physical abuse. Bullying is sexual abuse. Bullying is verbal abuse and verbal threats. That's not part of the typical negotiating friendships and having disagreements and different likes and dislikes. We're talking about behaviors that, if it occurred with someone older, they could be charged and arrested and prosecuted for, again, physical abuse or sexual abuse or verbal threats. So I didn't hear the entire question, but I hope I'm answering to what you're referring to. But no, bullying and physical violence and sexual violence is not part of, it should not be part of a typical child's experiences.
And this person also asked how much school involvement is too much when it comes to bullying. He's saying, should there be a line somewhere?
My hope is that every single parent I ever worked with when I worked in the public schools, until recently I worked in public school settings, my hope is that every single parent that came to me with a concern about bullying, that I took it seriously and I moved it quickly and effectively. And my understanding is that most personnel in schools want to do that. I think anytime a parent raises a concern or a child raises a concern that they're being victimized, that it needs to be dealt with seriously.
Well, Ken, while we've got you on the line, I thought an important aspect of our conversation last week had to do with the ways that a school official, a counselor like you worked as, but also parents can kind of identify that there may be something going on. Tell us about what that conversation needs to look like, and what you've learned is the best way to kind of steer somebody away from negative thoughts or thoughts of suicide and towards seeking help.
Well, Zeke, and again, I appreciate you talking with me last week. It was a real important time. Even your language just now, how to steer away from those discussions. I think it's the opposite. I think we need to get very personal, very specific, and very direct in asking questions about suicide. And if we suspect that suspect suicide, even if as a parent or a caregiver you're not certain, but something doesn't feel right, any concern, you investigate and approach that and ask that.
What are you asking specifically? I mean, if you have a teenager or a young child, who might be acting differently, or you suspect something is going on, I mean, how do you have that conversation with your child? What does that sound like? What would you recommend?
You can say, hey, I've noticed some changes, or I've noticed some differences. You don't seem to be yourself. You seem a little bit down. You're not eating like you used to. Your sleep's different, whatever it may be. And say, I'm really concerned. And what's going on? And if you're suspecting suicide, it is okay to use the word suicide. It's okay to ask the young person, are you thinking about suicide? Are you having thoughts of dying?
What are some of the red flags? When does a parent or school official get to that point to where they feel like it's appropriate to start asking those questions? What kinds of things are you looking for in your teenage son or your teenage student?
We've had a little technical difficulty here, but I believe if it's Lisa from the Hartline spoke to that earlier, that you look for hopelessness, helplessness, a sense of aloneness, a sense of not feeling worthy, of feeling low self-esteem. Those are things that you would look for, that you would immediately ask, and it's okay to ask. And if there's one message that any parents get, any caregivers get, or any school personnel get, the moment the question enters your mind, could this person be at risk of suicide, is the moment you go forward and you ask.
Lisa, would you agree then? Those are the things that you need to look for if you're a parent or you're a school official and you're concerned about suicide amongst your teenage student or child?
Absolutely. And, a few you can add on to that is just sometimes you might see somebody withdraw or isolate themselves. Something that's common, but especially common with teens, is giving away prized possessions. Obviously, that looks different at different ages. For a teen, that might be their brand new iPhone, that it doesn't make sense why they're giving it away. But that can be a factor. But I love that he said that when you ask, it's okay to use the word suicide. It's okay to ask directly. You might be able to see on the wall behind me, I have ask, listen, tell on my wall. Those are the 3 steps that we tell students: to ask directly, to listen without judgment, and then to tell an adult that will listen, which, just like bullying, they might be ignored at first.
And again, you can get help with some of these questions and answers at your hotline then, the 1-800-273-TALK?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Are there any other state resources, David, that we're missing that we should be highlighting right now for people who have concerns about a loved one, or concerns with their own thoughts of suicide?
Well, there are multiple resources, and Lisa has done a fantastic job of mentioning on the state level the 211 and also the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. One of the big things that we like to make sure is that people go onto the Suicide Prevention Resource Center, and there's a multitude of resources there, including responsible reporting guidelines. So we encourage you and everybody at OPUBCO and News OK to go on. It's a 1-page sheet. I think it's front and back 1 page. And it actually has information on reporting on suicides and how to report safely, so that the language used or the way that it's reported on doesn't contribute to more suicide. They've actually had studies that show the way the media report it can either help prevent more suicides or actually contribute to more suicide. So we'd love for people in their communities to take those to their reporters, their news stations, their radio stations, things of that nature, because that's one of the biggest reaches we can have is through the media.
David, you work for the state, and as we mentioned before, the state ranks pretty poorly when it comes to teen suicide. Is it just a matter of funding? Is there some political will? What is it that the people who live in Oklahoma can do to have their state take what steps are necessary to put that back in, to bring us back to level with maybe some of the other states around the country?
Well, suicide is extremely complicated, and some people, Ken and Lisa, both have mentioned that it takes a community approach, which is called the public health approach, meaning it's a multifaceted, complicated issue. Therefore, it requires a multifaceted, multi-level approach, meaning from the legislature, from faith-based groups, from parent groups, from individual parents, from schools, from community centers, from boys and girls clubs, everyone to become aware of the risk factors and the warning signs, and how to and where to refer someone. The state has many resources. We have community mental health centers throughout the state that cover the state, that can offer services when they're needed for mental health needs, whether it's emergency mental health needs or just someone coming in that may be starting to feel the signs of depression or anxiety or another mental disorder. So we have those resources. We also encourage people to learn about suicide through, there's a multitude of trainings through our grant. Ken Elliott is a champion. He's a great champion in the Edmond community and basically Oklahoma County with Question, Persuade, Refer. There's trainings depending on whether it's for clinical people, whether it's for the general public, so they can contact my office or they can contact Ken, and we can help them get in touch with trainings for their community so that they can then not only identify the risk factors, but also learn about the protective factors and what things will help prevent suicide or prevent someone from getting in that place in the first place.
Okay, and again, we have 1-800-273-TALK is a resource, the Hartline resource. Juliana, did you have some more questions online?
Sure. We're getting close to the end here, but I guess here's a comment from Tiffany. We haven't really addressed cyberbullying in schools. That's a really hot topic. I don't know which one of our experts might want to take this one, but how do schools handle that? Ken, is that somewhere you have expertise as far as how to handle cyberbullying?
Let's ask Javon. He's the youngest person on our panel.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good. Javon, do you hear me? Same question to you. Does your group ever deal with cyberbullying? Is this something that you guys have dealt with and addressed or seen, even at the college level?
I mean, I wouldn't say that we've done our part of getting to it, but we've definitely addressed it, and of course we've all seen it. Like, I see it every day. There's times when I'm a part of it. Not even that I'm the one doing the bullying, but I'm the one who's getting bullied, and it's something that is going to take a lot of precautions to stop because the internet is accessible to everyone. Like, there's Facebook, there's Twitter, there's Tumblr, there's all these networks where you can go and express yourself, and someone who doesn't necessarily share your views will disagree with you the only way they know how, which is to attack. So that's kind of how the cyberbullying thing takes effect to me. It's just I don't know if there's an actual way to address it as a whole because there's so many attackers behind it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like, well, this reader has written a note that personally I think people to remember it's Facebook, delete it, and move on. And also I think it's probably important for parents to really closely monitor their children's online activity. You just wish in cases where there's cyberbullying that somehow the parents would just delete the bullied child's page. I don't know. I don't have the solution. I'm not an expert. But does anyone else want to address anything that parents
Juliana,
can do?
I just want to reiterate for the people that may be logging in a little bit after we started that bullying is not the cause of suicide. It can be one of the contributing stressors, as Lisa said earlier. I just want to be really clear that bullying and suicide are two separate issues, that one can have an effect on the other, mm-hmm. but that for instance, the case in Stillwater, we still haven't found any evidence that bullying was a contributing factor in that. And we just like to be really clear with people that there's a multitude of factors, including substance abuse, including the things that Ken mentioned earlier, a loss in interest in things that they're normally passionate about. There's lots of things. Childhood trauma is a really big contributor to many things that happen in people's adult lives. So people that suffer trauma in their childhood often have higher rates of substance abuse, higher rates of suicide attempts, and several other physical health issues as well. So one of the best things we can do as a state, one of the most effective things we can do is to best address childhood trauma of all sorts. And when we say trauma, it's the types of trauma that Ken talked about: mental, emotional, neglect, physical, sexual, all types of trauma. The better we can do to address those as a state is the best method we can have to help prevent things such as suicide and substance abuse and all of those things that our state ranks fairly high in.
Thank you, David, for making that point. And I'm sorry if I'm overemphasizing it. Readers keep asking, but I think that's key, that bullying is not a sole factor when it comes to suicide. There are complicated reasons behind it, as you said. Zeke, did you have a question for Javon?
Yeah, Javon, I thought it'd be interesting to ask you. We've heard a lot from experts, and we've heard a lot from people who've worked in suicide and bullying, related issues previously. You're the young voice here. Is there some things that they need to know that maybe they haven't talked about, or some things that you think that parents or school administrators should take heed of when they're dealing with this type of issue?
Well, I just feel like everyone has said things that are very important. Like we've given, it's going to take a community. And what my grandmother's always told me is it takes a village to raise a child. So it takes the parents, taking the time out of their day to ask their child how was their day. It takes the schools, not necessarily focusing on the work of the student, the grade point average of the student, but the student itself. It takes the student, even if they are overwhelmed, it takes the student to be able to come to you, but they won't be able to if they feel as though there's no connection there. So it's going to take more interaction between the parents. It's going to take more interaction between the schools, the counselors, everyone. So it's a two-way thing. Like, you give in to get back.
Thanks. I think we might wrap it up. I think we've had a really productive discussion, and thank you so much to all of our panelists for sharing. Oh, I might be talking over Javon. Sorry if I am. But anyhow, again, we wanted to emphasize the suicide prevention number that's available statewide is 1-800-273-TALK. I'm Juliana Keeping, and this is Zeke Campfield. We are reporters. Thanks again to everyone for joining us today to have this really important discussion on teenage suicide prevention. I hope that you've learned something. I know that I have.
Thank you.
Thanks.